Hey guys, did I mention that concert I went to that my orbital t-shirt count went up to 3? Yeah, that's neat. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today I'm talking about the new album from Paul van Dyk. Music Rescues Me. Trance legend Paul van Dyk. This is now my second time speaking on his music at length. I'll admit I didn't grow up with the guy, despite having grown up with some of his colleagues in the genre, like BT, ATB, Robert Miles, even known Armin and Tiesto longer, despite them not really being a huge part of my life. I had only gotten to hear Paul van Dyk's stuff for the first time about a year ago when I reviewed his last album from then on, so there's no nostalgia factor for me like there is for some of those other artists I mentioned. But I definitely have a ton of respect for this guy, and have a pretty good grasp on his place in history. I'm not going to do the In Brief segment again, since I already did it in my From Then On review. You can check that out, I'll link it in the description, but, long story short, I've kept around 4 albums of his on my iPod. I kept 7 Ways as a really fun and enjoyable example of the early acid-heavy days of trance. I kept Out There and Back thanks to its game-changing status, though I still need to let that one grow on me more. I kept Reflections since I thought that was actually probably my favorite, being his most varied but still really consistently engaging. And I kept In Between because I thought despite a turn for the commercial ATB style there, it still held up pretty well, all things considered. 4 pretty different albums there that I thought illustrated the different dimensions to his work. I did not, however, actually keep From Then On. I haven't listened to that album once since I reviewed it. But I still thought it was pretty dang solid. It was a return to the old school styles of trance that initially turned him into such a hyped up legend, and some much needed fan service to his old fans who'd grown sick of the flatter, more commercial styles that so many trance artists had fallen victim to. And it was mostly instrumental, too. Now, personally, I didn't think there was much there you couldn't already get out of an earlier album of his, or really push forward the sound in any way, but I still appreciated how it so well played to his strengths, and made so many of his fans super happy. Anyways, I kinda had a feeling this latest album, Music Rescues Me, was probably going to be more of that exact same stuff that was on his last one. And, yeah, that is exactly what we got. It's basically just the same album again, but with slightly less variety. Very straightforward trance, calling back to the halcyon days of his prime, Out There and Back, and 7 Ways kind of stuff. And, once again, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Though, there's not really much of significance that I can actually add to it. I mean, it's pretty much pointless to talk about individual tracks here. Everything follows the exact same trance formulas he built up before, and there's just enough differences in chord progressions and melodies to not feel like you're listening to the same track over and over. There's 2 vocal tracks with You Are and the title track. There's a track called Time Traveler, which takes the BPM down to Eric Prydz level and opts for a generally smoother sound. The track Accelerator had a couple of more electro-tinged textures. The album ends with the obligatory piano ballad and reprise, and that's all. There's nothing else I have to add from a track-by-track basis. I mean, there technically is a co-producer on pretty much every track here, but if you hadn't told me that, I wouldn't have been able to guess. Everything here sounds like Paul van Dyk solo. Though, to be fair, I actually felt the same way about the guest producers on From Then On. I think there's a lot of the same people. None of these guests add anything to the formula or could be recognizable on their own merits. Though, to be fair, I also get the feeling this might have be more because Paul himself is a lot more easily recognizable. For instance, whenever he collaborated with BT, like, for instance, on Flaming June and Namaste, you can tell really obviously that he was there behind the scenes. But yeah, if you want a breakdown of what each of these guests on this album brought to the table, I got nothing. They all just sound like Paul van Dyk. Now, if I made this thing sound really boring in one note, well, okay, it is very one note, very, very one note, but despite that, I didn't find it boring. And maybe I should have. I mean, the album's 100 minutes long. It's no cakewalk, but I never got sick of the sound, even after that long. I had fun from front to back, enjoyed it just like I would any straight instrumental trance album. The grooves are super satisfying, the synths are super epic and uplifting, all the melodies and chord progressions are great. there's just like nothing for me to actually say about it. I mean, this is really not the kind of album that plays well to the way I usually talk about music. I would usually berate this kind of album for playing so heavily to one singular formula, given how I usually enjoy having more variety in the albums I listen to. That's why Reflections is the album that stuck with me the most from this guy. And there's barely any variety here at all. I also usually don't like it when an artist so obviously rehashes the same album a second time, and this is pretty blatantly just From Then On Part 2, but with even less dimensionality. I usually like it when I feel like I can recognize an artist's style by the way they put together tracks. Paul himself I can definitely recognize in that way, but no one else featured on this album has that honor. This is the kind of album that half makes me want to have a segment like Fantano's Why You Know Review or Spectrum Pulse's Trailing Edge, because there's really nothing of substance I have to add to this. I'm not gonna make that segment because I don't like binding this channel's format by, you know, release dates, but I will say, in spite of all these things working against this album, I still enjoyed it a fair bit, and didn't come out feeling sick of what I'd heard. It's really well executed for what it is. I personally would still probably want more out of a new Paul Van Dyk release than what this offers. Before this, pretty much all his previous albums have had their own unique take on his usual sound to set themselves apart, for better or for worse, and this one really doesn't. I don't like the premise, or lack thereof, but the execution is easily good enough for what it's trying to accomplish, so I think I can still give it a pass. I would have personally preferred more variety myself, but all you trance fanatics out there who loved From Then On are going to love this as well. It's just some damn good trance music. I'm overall feeling a 7.3 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. There are some people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.